When the news broke that legendary Motörhead guitarist Phil Campbell had died at the age of 64, the rock world reacted instantly. Fans flooded social media with memories, old concerts, and iconic riffs that helped define decades of heavy music. But while those tributes were spreading everywhere, another question quietly started appearing in comment sections. A question thousands of fans were asking: will there be a memorial service for Phil Campbell? So far, the answer is still unclear. Phil Campbell's passing has been confirmed by his family and by his band, Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons. But as of now, there has been no official announcement about a public memorial service. And that uncertainty has made fans even more emotional. Because when a musician leaves a legacy, this big people want a moment to say goodbye properly. They want a moment where the entire rock community can come together. But while fans continue waiting for news about a memorial, something unexpected has already happened. A tribute message appeared online. And within hours, thousands of people started sharing it. The message came from someone who knew Phil Campbell better than almost anyone else in the music industry. Motorhead drummer Mikkey Dee. At first glance, the message seemed simple. Just a few heartfelt lines about losing a friend. But when fans began reading it more carefully, they noticed something deeper hidden inside the words. Something that made this tribute feel much bigger than a normal farewell. And once people realized what that message truly meant, the entire story suddenly became far more emotional. But to understand why Mikkey Dee's tribute had such an impact, we have to go back to the beginning. Because the news of Phil Campbell's passing didn't come completely out of nowhere. Behind the scenes, there had already been signs that something was wrong. Earlier this year, Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons suddenly canceled a series of shows scheduled across Europe and Australia. The band explained that Phil had received medical advice preventing him from touring. No further details were shared at the time. For many fans, that announcement raised some concern. But most people assumed the situation was temporary. After all, musicians cancel tour for health reasons all the time. Few people imagined the situation might be much more serious. But according to the official statement later released by Phil's family, the reality was far more complicated. Phil Campbell had been recovering from a complex major operation. During that recovery, he spent time in intensive care. Despite medical efforts, complications followed. Eventually, he passed away peacefully. For fans around the world, the news felt sudden. Because even after decades in the music industry, Phil Campbell still seemed unstoppable. He had survived the chaos of the rock world. He had played thousands of shows. And he had helped build one of the most legendary bands in heavy metal history. But beyond the stage lights and guitar solos, there was another side of Phil Campbell that many fans rarely saw. The family's statement revealed something deeply personal. To millions of fans, he was a legendary guitarist. But to the people closest to him, he was something much more important. He was a devoted husband, a loving father, and a proud grandfather. In fact, within the family he had a nickname that many fans had never heard before. They called him Bandmate. That small detail surprised many people. Because it showed a completely different side of a musician who spent decades performing loud, aggressive rock music. The family described him as someone who was deeply loved by everyone who knew him. They also asked the public to respect their privacy during this extremely difficult time. But as the news spread through the music world, tributes began appearing almost immediately. Musicians, bands, producers, fans. Everyone seemed to have a story about Phil Campbell. However, one tribute stood out more than the others. And that tribute came from Mikkey Dee. For people who followed Motorhead closely, that message carried a powerful meaning. Because Mikkey Dee wasn't just another musician offering respect. He was someone who had spent decades standing beside Phil on stage. In his message, Mikkey revealed that he had received the news earlier that morning. And he didn't hide how painful the moment felt. He described the loss as extremely sad. But then he used words that immediately caught the attention of fans. He called Phil Campbell his brother and his dear friend. That alone told people a lot about the relationship between the two musicians. But Mikkey continued. And what he said next made the tribute even more emotional. He wrote that Phil Campbell was the funniest guy he had ever known. Not just a talented guitarist. Not just a respected musician. The funniest person he had ever met. For someone who spent decades touring around the world, meeting thousands of people, that statement meant something. But Mikkey Dee didn't stop there. He also described Phil as the best rock guitar player he had ever played with. That line quickly started circulating online. Because coming from a drummer who has worked with many great musicians, that kind of praise carries real weight. But there was another part of the tribute that revealed something even more important. Mikkey wrote that the two of them had written 12 studio albums together. 12. That number alone shows how deep their musical partnership really was. For years, Phil Campbell and Mikkey Dee helped shape the sound of Motorhead. Together, album after album, tour after tour. And according to Mikkey, Phil never stopped surprising him with his talent. Even after decades of playing together. But to truly understand the emotional power behind this tribute, we need to go back even further. Back to the moment when Phil Campbell first joined Motorhead. That moment happened in 1984. At the time, Motorhead was already becoming one of the most intense bands in rock music. The group was led by the legendary frontman Lemmy Kilmister. When Phil Campbell joined the band, he quickly became an essential part of the sound that fans loved. Over time, the band went through several lineup changes. But eventually a powerful trio emerged. Lemmy, Phil Campbell, and Mikkey Dee. Together, they created some of the most unforgettable albums in Motorhead history. Albums that helped define an entire era of heavy music. During the later years of the band, Phil Campbell became the sole guitarist. For more than 2 decades, he carried that responsibility. Albums like Orgasmatron 1916 and Bastards became fan favorites. And throughout all those years, the chemistry between Campbell and Dee remained strong. But even a band as legendary as Motorhead eventually faced a moment that changed everything. That moment came in December 2015. That was when Lemmy Kilmister passed away. His death shocked the entire rock world. Despite serious health problems, Lemmy had continued performing almost until the very end. Motorhead's final concert took place in Berlin. And after Lemmy's passing, the band officially came to an end. For many fans, it felt like the closing of a historic chapter in rock history. But Phil Campbell wasn't finished with music. Instead of disappearing from the stage, he started something new. He formed a band called Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons. And this time, the band included members of his own family. His sons, Todd, Dane, and Tyler. For fans, this created something unique. A legendary guitarist performing side by side with his children. The band quickly developed its own following. They toured. They recorded. And Phil Campbell continued doing what he loved most. Playing rock music. That is why the news of his passing felt so shocking. Because even after the end of Motorhead, Phil Campbell still seemed like a permanent figure in the rock world. But when Mikkey Dee finished his tribute message, the final lines were the ones that stayed with fans the longest. He ended his message with a powerful farewell. "Sleep well, my friend and rock soldier." Then he added something that instantly caught people's attention. He told Phil to say hello to several old friends. Lemmy, Woozle, Filthy, and Eddie. All musicians connected to the long history of Motorhead. In a way, Mikkey imagined them together again somewhere. A crazy gang hanging out once more. For many fans, those words were incredibly emotional. But hidden inside that tribute was another realization. A realization that many people didn't notice immediately. After Phil Campbell's passing, something historic quietly happened. Mikkey Dee is now the last surviving member of Motorhead's final lineup. For decades, that trio felt almost unstoppable. Their concerts were loud. Their personalities were unforgettable. And their music influenced generations of bands. But time eventually catches up with every legend. Even the biggest ones. That is why Mikkey Dee's tribute resonated so deeply with fans around the world. It wasn't just about losing a guitarist. It wasn't only about saying goodbye to a friend. It was also a reminder that an entire era of rock history is slowly fading away. Today, fans are still waiting to hear whether an official memorial service will be announced for Phil Campbell. So far, no public event has been confirmed. But if that moment does arrive, it will likely bring together musicians and fans from across the rock community. Because Phil Campbell's impact on music is impossible to ignore. Until then, Mikkey Dee's tribute continues to circulate online. And every time people read those words again, they realized something. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a message marking the end of a chapter in rock history. But even though Phil Campbell is gone, the music he helped create will continue playing. For years. For decades. And for generations of rock fans who will keep discovering the sound of Motörhead long into the future.